Hello and welcome to The Extra Mile. I'm Linda Boudreaux. Our guest today is David Begneaud. David is the proprietor of the Historic Map Company here in Lafayette. He's a map collector and he has a lot of wonderful historic maps. So we're going to learn a lot about Louisiana and the United States today. David, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me in.
What fun. I never would have thought that just when you start looking at maps and start kind of paying attention to them, how much of our history you can tell.
Right,
huh?
we have a lot of history with maps in Louisiana. Our coastline has changed so much. Our Louisiana has flown under 10 different flags. I think that's the most out of any state in the United States. I think Florida may have flown under 6 flags, but we have raised 10 flags over this state.
Lucky us.
So we have a past that went back and forth from Spain to France, Britain, back to Spain, France, and finally the United States purchased Louisiana from France in 1803.
And all of that is documented many ways, but also in maps, is that right?
Right, and a lot of maps document this, and a lot of your history books document it, and a lot of them do contradict each other. And maps contradict each other also. You can look at maps of Louisiana. We have a few maps that show Vermilionville, exactly where Abbeville is.
Now, Vermilionville would be what is now known as Lafayette.
It's Lafayette, correct.
Okay.
And previous to that, some of the maps, they don't call it Lafayette, it says Pinot, or settlement of the Arsenault family.
Oh, really? I never heard that.
On the 1816 map, it shows that. And then some prior maps will show Moutonville, where Lafayette is. And because Lafayette the land was donated by Mr. Mouton, and so some of the maps will show Moutonville there.
So you can just kind of do the genealogical trace back as well.
Right.
You know, I had not really, until I spent a little time with you today, realized how totally fascinating maps are, and
Yes.
and not only are they fascinating, how incredibly beautiful
Yes.
maps
yes.
are. They are really works of art,
Right,
aren't
they are works of art. Most maps, the old maps in the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, they were all hand-drawn, hand-colored. They didn't have machines drawing the maps. When they got into the late 1800s, early 1900s, when you hear a hand-colored map, that's a map where map makers would print them up by the thousands, and they would actually have children in orphanages hand color the borders around maps and so forth. I believe I have one under here. This would be an example of a hand-colored map. This is the 1835 Bradford. This has Moutonville on it, by the way.
Okay, and this is 1835,
1835 Atlas map. It's a common map, and it shows when Lafayette Parish extended all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, to present-day Grand Chenier, and across the Marsh Island, Louisiana. That was before Vermilion Parish came about. Lafayette Parish encompassed all of Vermilion Parish. And then when Vermilion Parish came, it left Lafayette Parish with a smaller percentage of land. And at the time, people in Lafayette Parish thought that the land down there was useless, worthless land. And
so they didn't care?
They didn't really care about it. And it had a lot of other things to do with it, cattle and things like that.
But that is a hand-colored map?
Yes, the borders are hand-colored right here.
And so that's the blue around here?
The blue around here, and the borders around the state
Around
itself.
the states, okay.
Yeah.
So would our children get paid for that? Was that kind of a job we gave
I don't know.
our
I don't have
kids?
any
I'm
research
thinking.
on that. I just heard that the kids, they would use orphanage children to hand-color maps.
What an interesting idea. What a great idea.
Yeah,
you know?
they were enterprising.
Yeah. So how did you get into maps? I mean, you know, like you're into...
I grew up around maps because my dad flew. He was a private pilot, and so everything involved maps. And we had a huge map of the United States on the wall at our house, and we'd sit there and bounce up and down on the sofa and look at the map and study the United States. And then later on, I started collecting what they call topographic maps of the state, where it's what they call a quadrangle map of a very small area.
Okay.
You know, like Lafayette Parish may take up 2 or 3 maps, and it's very detailed.
Okay. You started with those?
Yeah, started with those, and then later on I started trying to find old maps like these atlas maps, and then more surveyor type maps, you know, looking in courthouses and so forth. And then we started trying to find reprints of old original maps if we couldn't find the original map, and they're just really beautiful. One of the best maps we've ever seen that tells a lot about the history is the 1863 Chaffalay Basin map, which is this one right here.
You want to talk about that one now?
Yeah.
We're going to let Danny get in here.
I can pull that down.
Pull it down. Danny's going to get in here. We're going to get a close-up of it. And this is an absolutely exquisite map. This is a reproduction of
1863, Atchafalaya Basin. This was done for General Banks during the Civil War, during what they called the Gulf Campaign, and the Union soldiers were coming, and they were coming through Brashear City. Brashear City is Morgan City at the time. It was Brashear City, and was held by the Union. The Union was in charge of Brashear City, and they were trying to pinpoint a way to come through the basin and bypass Port Hudson. They were having trouble getting around Port Hudson, but you had certain map makers. In the case right here, Henry Abbott put together a lot of maps for the Union soldiers, and this was, you could see where they taped a bunch of maps together. But what's really unique about this map, it shows South Louisiana when we had the prairies west of Lafayette. You talk about the prairies in Eunice and Mamou, and it has all the prairies listed. And the only remains we really have of all these prairies, other than what they're trying to restore, would be all these ridge tree lines are still there because they're following the natural coulees and so forth. But they say they had elk and bison on these prairies up until the turn of the century. It shows Vermilionville or Lafayette as a very small settlement, and Opelousas was pretty much a metropolis back then.
That was the big city.
Yes, because prior to that you had counties, the Opelousas County, the Attakapaw County, and so forth, and that was the heart of the Opelousas district, was Opelousas, and you had more travel going through Opelousas than Lafayette at the time.
Because of the...
I don't know exactly why. It was the seat of the Opelousas district, and it encompassed a very large area. It also shows where water could spread out every spring, where it's highlighted in green when you get into a high water event. With the snow melt and so forth, you didn't have levees containing your water like you do now, so it could go all the way. Baton Rouge is very small, and they're showing a red road coming out of Baton Rouge in the 1860s, and it was already named Highland Road back then. So,
it's still named Highland Road.
Still named Highland Road, and now they're building houses below Highland Road.
That's
so I would
true.
question building a house down there on the lower
on account
side.
of how it's green on the other side of Highland Road. Yeah.
The map also shows when Old River was still connected to the Mississippi River.
Oh my.
And False River already broke away from the Mississippi River at that time, and that's prior to the Old River control structure right there. So
this is just wonderful.
That's been a really nice map. People like this map to hang in their office, and it'll keep you busy for a long time.
So people buy maps and hang them in their offices because why?
They're just beautiful. As far, if I was a physician and I was concerned about somebody waiting in my waiting room, I'd feel more relaxed if they're out there looking at a map versus looking at a landscape scene from Italy or something like that that you would typically see in an office environment. So I know several attorney offices have maps hanging on their walls where people can look at maps, and maps also have a lot to do in the legal world. The original maps that show the landowners and the original land grants along the Mississippi River, that's still used today in the Supreme Court of Louisiana.
Oh, really?
You know, they take it all the way back to those original land grants when you get into land cases. In Louisiana, we have a lot of land cases. Somebody came and borrowed this particular map from me, and they were bringing it to the courtroom the next day, and it had to do with a land case that was going on in the swamps. And there was a bayou that's named on that map that people didn't think was named at the time, but in 1863 that little bayou was named as a named waterway.
So these really, they set legal,
right.
They help to determine legal decisions today based on what was decided.
And that's very important in Louisiana with your water bodies being owned by the state of Louisiana and people claiming water bodies as private property and so forth. So that comes.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. I was thinking, you know, like you said, if you're at your doctor's office or the lawyer's office, just gazing at a map. You know, it's like the more you look, the more you see, huh?
Right.
So you don't get bored with them at all.
No, not at all. And we spot things on these maps that we look at the same map for 2 years, and then somebody else will point something out. I'll go to a map show and somebody will be looking at the map and they say, did you realize that this happened right here on this particular year and so forth? And I say, oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So I learn a lot about maps from people that come to look at the maps.
So earlier you said something I wanted to follow up on.
Oh.
So we had counties in Louisiana at one time?
Yes, right after Louisiana Purchase, they actually still called them counties. You had the Attakapaw County, which is now Lafayette Parish, Vermilion Parish, Iberia, Upper and Lower St. Martin Parish. That was all the Attakapaw County. and then it was all the Attakapaw District, and then it was all St. Martin Parish. What 6 parishes now, or 5 parishes, was all St. Martin Parish, and then that got split into St. Martin and St. Mary Parish, and then you had St. Martin, St. Mary, and Lafayette, and then finally Iberia Parish came and cut St. Martin Parish in half.
Which
And so you
makes
have
so much
Upper
sense.
St. Martin, Lower St. Martin Parish.
So we became parishes when?
And the Louisiana Purchase
Okay,
happened
that's
in
when everything changed.
1803. 1804, they called, was present-day Louisiana, the territory, the Orleans.
You have a map for
I have
that,
a map of that
think?
right here. And this was the first map that showed the territory of Orleans,
We're gonna s-
and then from the
I'm
33rd
just gonna
parallel
take a
up, all the way to Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota. 13 states, that was the territory of Louisiana. Okay, so the territory of Louisiana went from Montana, most of Wyoming, most of Colorado, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then followed the Mississippi River all down. And then a year later, they separated us into territory of Orleans.
That's
and
what
up,
this shows, right? This is territory
up to
of
the
Orleans.
Mississippi River, which
Okay.
was the West Florida, Spanish West Florida. Okay, that's why you hear the Florida parishes.
I wondered about that.
Right.
Okay, that's why.
And in 1810, the Americans that were occupying the Spanish West Florida had a revolt. Baton Rouge was really under British rule. Anything east of the Mississippi was under British rule at that time, and they called it Spanish West Florida. After that, they had a little revolt in 1810 for a couple of months, and finally the United States and Spanish West Florida worked things out, and then this became Louisiana, what's called the Florida parishes now. So,
Okay.
when they surveyed the state, the survey grids are a little bit different in the Florida parishes than they are in the rest of the state.
And that's because,
They use a different method of surveying
Okay.
everything. Okay.
that doesn't affect anything, it's just how it is?
Yeah, that's just how it is.
Okay.
Everything.
Now, why is this on this map, this one little decorative?
That decorative scroll right there has principal distances by way of the water, because you didn't have roads back then, obviously. Everything had to do with water. Back then, that was your interstates, was your waterways. Okay, when they bought the Louisiana Purchase, Napoleon said, well, whoever has New Orleans has basically the gateway, to North America.
Yeah.
They can control,
Yeah.
that's what's going to
That's
really...
how you get up to Montana then?
Right, that was the starting point for people going up into the United States. And so, it's very important. New Orleans has such a big impact on the whole country, because the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. You just pretty much had the eastern coast right
Yeah.
there, the colonies and
Yeah.
so forth. And then when they bought the Louisiana Purchase right there, that doubled the size of the United States. So landowners that are buying land in Louisiana, when they started buying land, and getting land grants, they were basically getting it from the federal government. The Louisiana was formed from the federal government buying in the United States and buying it from France and so forth. And it was the deal of the century, $15 million, which comes out to about 3 cents an acre. Okay.
Now, you said, is this the map that shows some of the interesting,
This map, what it shows the Mississippi River right here. So all your towns are along basically the Mississippi River. You can see western Louisiana was pretty much barren. There was not much
okay, not too
in
much
western
going on.
Louisiana.
I
It really
see.
wasn't settled. At the time, you still had your Indians, your Attakapaw, your Chitimacha, and so forth. And those things had to be worked out also after Louisiana Purchase.
So there was a lot of work to be done.
Right, yeah, quite a bit of work to be done. This map right here is every few years they would put out an official survey map of the state of Louisiana. And you have to realize these guys were surveying the state of Louisiana. Now, prior to the territory of Orleans, you had the territory of Mississippi.
That's the one I
they
was
were able
wondering
to
about,
just
yeah.
extend their latitude lines over when they started dividing it up into townships and sections and so forth. They were able to work off of Mississippi, and they finally agreed upon a starting point, which you call, I guess, the baseline, where you either north, south, east, or west. And this is right by the I-49 by the Cheneyville exit. That's where ground zero is for all your surveys in the state of Louisiana.
I had no idea.
And they surveyed this state of Louisiana basically by dragging chains. They didn't have tape measures. They used a special chain,
That's
a
what the
surveying
chains were
chain.
for.
Right, and they still use that in courthouses. You'll see measurements of towns. If you go to Youngsville, and there's an old map on the wall, and the dimensions of the town are in chains. The chain was 66.6 feet long. And so it's just amazing that they were able to survey our entire state in the 1860s.
I'm kind of in awe of that, you know, because
without satellites or anything like that. And they've gone back and cross-checked these things, and these guys were very, very accurate on their measurements. It was quite amazing.
And when you think about the terrain they had to get through and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
it doesn't sound like an easy job
Right.
to me.
And they do have some sections that really haven't been surveyed on the ground precisely, but they have pretty much an idea what it is down in the marshlands in Vermilion Parish and Cameron Parish and places like that.
What do we know about the map makers? You know, I mean, we're looking at these and we're thinking about the people that had to go out there and do all that work.
Right.
And
The thing, if we just back up 100 years to the 1700s, the first people that were running around this part of the country down here were the French that came down from Canada. And this was what they called the mother map of all maps right here. This was put out in around 1721. And this gave them a pretty good idea of what our country today looks like. And this was
this was done in when?
1721.
Wow,
So you had a
look at
guy
that.
named, his last name was Begneaud. He came down, he was born in Quebec. And he came down after LaSalle, he came down the Mississippi River, and he was stationed along the coast. And you had a lot of missions, and you had priests along the Gulf Coast and everything. And most of the people that were exploring, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, but Begneaud, he could read and write very well, and he could remember things and draw maps. And he's the one that founded Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Oh, really?
In 1714, which is the oldest town in the entire Louisiana Purchase. And so he made explorations. He's a Frenchman. And he would take the El Camino Real Trail, which went from Natchitoches all the way pretty much to Mexico City. And so this map would show the route that he went, and then 3 years later the route he came back. And along the way, when he got close to Mexico, right on the border of the Rio Grande, it wasn't the border of Mexico, he was pretty much in Mexico at that time. Anything west of the Sabine was considered, you know, it was pretty much Mexico. It was Spanish territory. I don't think they call it Mexico, it was Spanish territory. Well, he got detained right here because he was French, and the Spanish were nervous that the French were going to come down there and start fooling with their gold and silver mines. And he ended up, the goddaughter, the grandchild of the commander of the fort, fell in love with him. And they ended up getting married, and he ended up coming back, and the Spanish and the French worked together around Natchitoches area at that time. It's just
what a great story.
It's just amazing what these guys did. But anyhow, Begneaud would report his data back to this priest in Mobile, Lemaire, and Lemaire would relay the information back to the map makers in France. And that's how they put this map together right here. And then after that, maps were copied like this. This one's in French right here. And there's a lot of things on here that are far-fetched, right? I can't read French very well. This said wandering Indians and man-eaters, and I don't think that was the case. And they had really good relations with the Indians around the Natchitoches area and so forth. They traded back and forth. But it's just amazing that 300 years ago they had the rivers plotted, you know, very close to what they are. You know, I tell people I was more impressed with these guys in the space program.
Well, when you think about what they did, and they were looking at it all from ground level,
right.
You know, to figure all this out, and then to send it back to France to have them drawn.
Right, and have it drawn and so forth. So if you go to a map show, they only have 1 or 2 in the United States per year where people come from around the world with original maps just like this, and the people from France and Spain really have the treasures. They have some really good maps. So
they were the ones that really were the leaders in map making?
Right, the French and the Spanish had the first good maps. Mm-hmm.
So when you start talking about maps as something to collect,
right?
How do you even know, how do you even get into it, or how do you know what to do? I mean, they're, like, these are beautiful, but where do you find them?
Right.
How does this whole thing work?
Obviously, this is a reprint of an old map right here, and if I wanted the original map, it wouldn't take long. You know, you could Google a 1721 Delisle map, and you would find somebody out there. And the thing is, though, you would want to go through a real reputable map dealer, like in Boston or New York City. There's one in Tennessee that I know, and he's answered questions on maps for me. And somebody, they sell reproduction maps now, because with modern technology and all that, you really wouldn't want to take a chance on paying a lot of money, you know, in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000 for a map like this, and find out that it was actually a reprint, like people do with artwork now. That's very common.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to, people that are interested in investing really need to do their homework.
You need to do your homework, and it's very easy to do your homework online now with reputable map deals. I wouldn't buy one on eBay that somebody's claiming is an original 1720 map, you know, for $200. Buy it now. It'd be suspect.
It's probably not going to happen.
No, it's probably not going to happen.
Now you have a map shop. You have a store. How did you? Is it just because you ended up having so many maps in your collection? I mean, did you ever?
Oh no, I didn't have that many maps in the collection beforehand, but we were restoring a small little building near the oil center. It was just so cool that we made it look a lot older than it actually is.
So
it
it's
looks like it's a pre-1900s building, but it was really built in the 50s. And so we used the downstairs as our map shop, where we can spread out maps, and also let nonprofit groups use the map shop for they need to do a quick meeting, some group, so we'll use the map shop for a meeting space, and it works out good to do that. But people will come over and want to look at maps and spread them out on tables and look at maps and talk about maps, or look at books on maps.
Okay, and you have all that available there. And you're at the horse farm once a month?
Once a month we go to the horse farm and we set up, and that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, because we have to haul a lot of things, and we bring frame maps out there, and you have to really be on top of it for the weather. When it gets really hot and it gets cool, and you have a temperature change early in the morning when the sun's coming up, and the sun starts shining on a framed map, you might have moisture start forming on the map and so forth, so you really have to watch that.
That was another question I had. Is there any special care for these maps? Like this wonderful map here, it's blue.
Right.
It's a different kind of map.
Right. This one's printed. I found the original to this map at an antique shop a long time ago, and we had it framed, and it's just a beautiful map. That's what you would call
absolutely gorgeous.
They call these blueprint maps, and now people can take maps of, say, New Orleans, and they have methods when they print them where they can turn it into what they call a blueprint map. And this is actually the railroads from Port Barre, Opelousas area, down to Patterson. It may even be called Pattersonville on this map. It was called Pattersonville before Patterson, which was across from Brashear. This doesn't show any roads. It shows Lafayette is very small. We think this was around early 1900s, you know, 1903, 1905, something like that. Shows the Atchafalaya Basin when Grand Lake was a huge lake. Grand Lake now, the Whiskey Bay Pilot Channel runs right through the middle of it, so it's just a channel with willow trees on each side. And it shows the railroad, how big it was back then. It went to right by Parks, Louisiana, Ile-l'Abbé, Banker, and went through Laurelville, and you had all these spurs that went to all these refineries.
Oh, that's what they were doing.
All the spurs went to refineries, and when I say refinery, I'm not talking about oil refinery, I'm talking sugar refineries.
Oh, okay, thank you for clarifying.
Right. So you had all these sugar refineries, and you also had the name of towns that people don't hear about anymore. For instance, above St. Martinville, you have Breaux Bridge right here, Orneville right here. Right above St. Martinville, on the old maps it's St. Martinsville, actually. You have Levert, which is where the sugar mill is right there, and you have the St. John Sugar Refinery, but you have something called Gautier right here, and a good friend of mine, Lester, his ancestors grew up right there at a place called Gautier, and this is the first time he ever saw it on a map, was right on this particular map.
Wow, that must have been wonderful for him.
Right.
Yeah, there we are. There's where we started.
Right, so there's a lot of towns on here that they cease calling by those names and so forth, and but they're on this particular map, and it's really interesting map.
It's a great map.
And we left it the same.
Beautiful.
We left it the same. You know, we could have photoshopped this stain out or the patch down here out, and so I want to leave it exactly the same.
It's beautiful.
And we'll put it like that.
So is there any special care that you have to, or is just any?
On an original map, there's really, when I go to these map shows, these people have these maps out that are worth, you know, unbelievable amounts of money. They just have them laying on tables. You can touch them and feel them and everything, because an original map that has wrinkles and things, it really doesn't matter. whenever we frame an original map, we always do what they like to call like an archival mounting, where you just hinge it. It's just pretty much hanging in there. You don't adhere it to a foam board like you would do with a reprint map. Normally, if you go to a frame shop, they would adhere it to a foam board and then frame it and so forth. But an original map, you obviously want to keep it in a dry condition and don't have too much sunlight on it. You know, pretty much like an oil painting. I would say
those are the secrets.
The same thing. But you got to realize these maps. This map was printed in 1835 right here. I'm dragging it off the floor.
Wait, is that an original 1835 map?
Yes, this is an 1835 map right here.
I thought it was a reproduction.
Oh no, that's an original right there.
So you treat it very casually. So that means that they're
well, you want to have fun with them.
They're pretty durable.
You want to have fun with them. This is an
1847
47 map right here. Now I'm trying to protect it a little bit more. I put it on here just for transporting it around and everything.
Wow.
But that's an 1847 map right there.
So these are all so much fun. We're just about out of time, and so just kind of in the last quick second that we have, people, if they want to find you, they can go to the maps shop on
1020 Auburn Avenue.
Okay.
Basically, they would have to call me.
Okay, don't go by, call.
Come by the horse farm once a month, and the horse farm always posts who's going to be there a few days before, and we're typically there towards the end of the month. We're going to be there this Saturday. Okay. I believe that's the 10th. And then we're also going to be there on May 30th. I'll be there twice this.
So if you want to see him, go to the horse farm. Right. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing. It was
Enjoy
great.
being here.
Thanks. And thank you for watching The Extra Mile.